Look at a man working as a carpenter in ancient Nazareth, sweating, pulling a saw through rough wood. Did that man, in that exact moment, possess the active consciousness of being the creator of the universe? The records capture moments where this divine identity breaks through to the surface. At 12 years old, Jesus already claimed a unique, exclusive relationship with God as his Father. Later, he stated he existed before Abraham was even born, and spoke of sharing glory with the Father before the world began. But right alongside those claims, the same texts record a different reality. We read that he genuinely grew in wisdom as a child. As an adult, he asked questions to find out information he didn't have, and he stated he did not know the day or the hour of the end times. These two patterns collide in the same person. We have a historical figure who claims the authority to forgive sins, a divine prerogative, yet who lacks cosmic information and experiences genuine human surprise. It is tempting to resolve this tension by assuming Jesus had full and constant access to infinite knowledge the entire time. But if he walked the earth with constant omniscience, his human experiences lose their weight. His questions to the disciples, his expressions of surprise, and his agonizing prayers in the garden become a performance. He would be a divine being merely wearing a human costume. So what if we take the opposite view and assume he never actually knew he was God? Removing his divine self-awareness fractures the gospel accounts. It requires us to discard his own direct statements about his identity, his trial confessions, and the foundation of early Christian worship. To understand Jesus, we need a framework that acknowledges his divine identity while making sense of his human limitations. Scholars have historically tested 3 major frameworks to solve this, which we can map out here. We have always knew everything, progressively learned, and never knew. And all 3 hit a wall. The first position, that he always knew everything, runs into the moments where he explicitly admits ignorance, like in Mark 13 when he says, "Neither the angels nor the Son know the time of the end." The second position, that he slowly figured out his identity over time, struggles against the records of his deep awareness of his divine sonship at just 12 years old. And the third position, that he never knew he was God, requires us to dismiss his "I am" statements and treat the core of his message as a later invention. When a framework requires us to ignore these specific, recorded contradictions, it isn't an explanation, it's a selection. There is, however, a fourth path. This path centers on a single Greek word used by the Apostle Paul, Kenosis, which translates to self-emptying. In this framework, Jesus did not empty himself of his divine identity or lose his divine attributes. Instead, he placed a voluntary restraint over them to live within the human experience. He laid aside the independent exercise of those divine privileges. He chose to route his power and knowledge through a posture of dependence on the Father and reliance on the Spirit. Practically, this means his ministry was Spirit-anointed. He performed miracles and taught with authority, not by activating his own unmediated divine power, but by depending on the Holy Spirit working through him. His limitations were a voluntary choice of how to operate. He retained his complete identity as God while genuinely living within the constraints of a human mind and body. Viewing the Gospels through this lens of self-emptying brings a new weight to the individual scenes. The physical realities become concrete. When he fasted in the wilderness, the hunger in his stomach was a biological fact. When he sat by a well in Samaria, his exhaustion was a real physical limit, not a divine being faking a need for rest. The same applies to his psychological reality. In the Garden of Gethsemane, his plea to let the cup pass reflects the real-time wrestling of a human consciousness, shrinking from suffering while submitting to the Father's will. Because he chose the path of kenosis, Jesus did not float above humanity, he inhabited it fully, making his suffering and his faith entirely authentic. If his limitations were real, then his life of faith and dependence is the model he offers to his followers. We often value absolute independence and control, yet the Son of God lived in a constant posture of receiving from another. The hours he spent in prayer, listening, waiting, and drawing strength from the Father, demonstrate the posture he invites his disciples to enter. He lived as a man of prayer so that we might learn to do the same. The question at the end of the record isn't whether we are capable enough to handle our lives. The question is whether we are willing to adopt the same receptive, trusting posture that the Son of God lived out in our shoes.